Hi, my name is Benedict for Higher Hertz. In this video, we're taking a bit of a look into HalfTime, the plugin from Cableguys. It's a bit of an odd one, and I will discuss some of that and try not to get too bogged down in it at the same time. It's very focused on doing basically one specific thing, which is playing back sections of real-time audio at half the speed. Let me give you an idea. Normal speed. Now, on the surface, that seems entirely pointless. And you kind of got to wonder, well, why? But there are some purposes for it. Let's step back for a moment and have a look. Cableguys. Cableguys have been around for some time, and I've got to say that to some extent, their approach is not my approach. And I try to be sort of really open in what I do, but I must also be honest with you that what this product is and the way that I approach music are really kind of in complete opposites. So while I would do my very best to be open-minded about this, and I appreciate that this is actually a good product in its own way, don't expect me to be able to say, oh, well, you know, this is going to act like this, because I'm not the guy for that. If you need a tutorial, I'm looking at, well, what does the product do? Does it seem like a solid product? Bearing in mind what it says it's going to do and what it delivers, yes, I actually think it's really well done. The product itself. Now, I did come in thinking that this was going to be a $50 or an $80 product, and I was not going to be impressed at that because it's a one-trick pony. That is, it does have a few other little bits and pieces. Hello, thank you. But it mostly just kind of does one thing. And of course, unfortunately, it does a thing that I just barely see a lot of use for. I have discovered a couple of possible uses that I might use it for, but as it points out, most of this is about trying to sound like somebody else, and I don't get that. I have heard things that seem like they are done using this or similar processes and didn't realize that's how they were done, so it's interesting to know, oh, okay, that's probably what they did. But I don't like the results. That's not the fault of the tool, that's the fault of the people using the tools, or the fault of the person listening to the material and just going, I don't get it. I don't get why that's considered good. But at $12, if it's the thing that you need done and you're not prepared to do it by hand, because all of this can be done by hand when you understand what it's doing, I did that in like about a minute, then I think it's actually very, very good buying for a nicely built plugin. So we probably should dig in a little to my caveat or my concern. My concern is that as an actual musician, as a composer, because I'm that as well as a mix engineer, that music, thank you, that music is about telling a story. And one of the problems with this approach of saying I get a slab of audio, as in I don't make my own notes, and then I take that slab of audio that somebody else made, and then I goof with it, I chop it up, I munge it about, I mess with it, I mutate it. That to me just doesn't seem like making music. I get that it can be done, and I get that it has its purposes, because I will do those things if I need those results. But how people think that they're really building something, I don't get. Therefore, it will colour my opinion on the validity of the tool. Not the quality of the tool, but the validity of the tool. Validity meaning, why would we need it in the first place? Bear in mind, I grew up in the era in which when people wanted to do these things, they did them by hand. They didn't have a tool that you could go out and buy for $12, $17 in Australia, that did this stuff for you. We had to do it ourselves. So to me, this is kind of like as if I were an artist, a painter, being offered a colour by numbers book and saying, look, this will teach you to be a better artist. It'd be kind of like, hard to fathom. Quickly run through the good and bad. The good is it definitely does what it says it's going to do. And there are a few other tricks and things up its sleeve. So yes, you are going to get what it says it's going to do. Its price is low, as it should be. For a one-trick pony, I think the price is very good and very attractive. I think the quality of code and the way that it's behaved here in Reason, the only thing I haven't tried to do is automate anything, but I can't see that being a problem because everything seems very well behaved. I think, yeah, Cableguys are doing good quality work, as I've always thought they do good quality work. I just don't dig where they're going. The bad is, yes, it's a one-trick pony, but really my biggest issue is you have no real control over anything. Like, it's, as I say, it's a little bit colored by number. I can press this button or I can press that button. If it allowed me to have more control over what was going on, then I would probably feel a lot more enthused about it for its possibilities. But its possibility is quite definite in its name, in that we'll allow you to play things back at half the speed or half the time, or whatever. It's a tool that I struggle to understand. Why should this exist? But at the same time, the fact that it does exist is kind of like, yeah, it seems well made. It looks nice. You can change the size of it nicely. It's well thought through. It seems well coded. So I can't give it a bad rap based on that. Let's look into what it does. Again, we'll have our piece of music. We end up getting this dreamy kind of a thing in a weird way. And it took me a bit to wonder why, because I straight away went and used Reason and took some stuff and stretched that to twice the length, which of course drops it an octave. And I'm thinking, this isn't the same result. What are they doing? And then I spent some time and realized that it doesn't quite work the way you think it works. What it does actually is quite clever. So where it says 1 bar, it's taking the first half a bar of material into itself, so recording it in like a sample, and then playing it back at half the speed to fill up that whole bar. So if we were looking at the bars here, so bar 7, if we started at bar 7, it's recording in bar 7 to 7.5, but playing it back over 7 to 8, which fills in all that time, as well as, of course, dropping the pitching. We have no real control over pitching in this. In doing that, we're losing half of our material. So if we were to try and track our melody here, let's listen to the actual melody. Just that first bit. Now let's listen to it again. Hear how we've lost this part of the melody. It's picking up the first bit, but it's abandoning the rest. That's, to me, a little worrying, and explains why when I hear things that clearly are done with a process that is this or similar to this, I feel like this piece feels like a creepy, disconnected dream. You know, you have a dream where something happens and then suddenly something else is happening. It's all rather Purple Dishwasher Monkey. And that's interesting. You know, I could sort of say, oh, well, that would be an interesting way of making a sort of disconnected dream piece. But I don't get why we'd want to have a whole culture, a whole genre of making these pieces that are fundamentally broken. And believe me, I'm all for cool pieces about dreams. You know, like Deep Purple's Chasing Shadows from '67 is just awesome, but it's musically complete. This is just hacking bits out of the middle to give ourselves the impression that we're improving on what we had in the first place, and that causes me some serious issues, not only as a composer, as a craftsman, but as the guy who often gets asked to listen to this kind of stuff, and I'm kind of like, this is broken. Half the sentence is missing. It's like if we stripped out half of my words in what I'm saying, I would become incoherent. But nonetheless, interesting. So if we set our loop time to 2 bars, it'll take in 1 bar of information, dropped this, picked that up, dropped that. So if we wanted to hear my 4-bar loop, we'd have to go to 8 bars. But note how we'll end up with a rather different result now. That is literally, bar the DSP differences in how this sounds, as though I would have taken this, turned it into a piece of audio, stretched it out, played it at half the time. So we'll do that, but it's really what else it's doing that makes it interesting, but potentially damaging from a musical perspective. Now, I took the same thing. Remember, as I said, I grew up in the time where all of this was done by hand, and we found our happy accidents by doing things by hand or by going, what if I did that? Rather than having just a push button that allows us to colour by numbers. So I did literally what this was doing, in that I had a 2-bar setting, so I kept... Actually, no, I had the 1-bar setting, so the default setting, and did it myself. Let's let it be. Cableguys. So it's a little hard to A-B them because it only runs when it's got stuff happening, which makes sense in a way. I guess if we were using this regularly, we'd probably have to bounce it down. A thing I don't love, because I love everything to be happening in real time, so if I want to finesse one note, I can. We hear a sonic difference because the way that processing has ended up being done using Reason's DAW engine, like its sequencer audio engine, is obviously a little different. What Cableguys have done is they've rounded off the sound of what we get to deliver a warmer, friendlier, nicer kind of a sound. Good and bad. Again, I'd rather have control over that myself. But it is possible to duplicate once you know what's going on. It just requires time, but it didn't require a lot of time. And bear in mind, I'm a guy who doesn't do this kind of thing. I'm interested to know how it works, and it only took me a couple of minutes to slice this up and make my own audio version of it. So my concern is this just a lazy fire, a thing that strips us of our ability to do our craft? Now, there's nothing against Cableguys, although it sort of is, because I think that anybody who encourages you, kind of like a drug peddler, they're encouraging somebody to do something that's not so good for them, but whatever, that's an argument for another time and place. So looking into it a little bit more, we can run our loop, set our times. So we do end up with a musically different result. With shorter times, it's going to pick up more of the melody. It's still discarding half of it, but it's going to pick up more of the melody. Therefore, we've actually got a melody variation. Is that a good plan or not? I don't know, but we do. The tighter we get, the stranger it gets. And then this is actually rather interesting. This I do think is a bit cool. We can use different variations in terms of timing. That particularly works well if we go to a 1.5 speed. The problem with 1.5 speed is, of course, that it's not particularly musically valid, as in our harmonies will now be broken. You can find ways to make it work, But please be aware, if your harmonies are broken, the rest of the piece becomes uncomfortable, and you either find it very hard to put notes against it, or you go, oh, that doesn't work, you take your notes out, and now you're just left with a sound effect. And okay, but records built of nothing but sound effects are generally rather pointless. But this is interesting. The 1.5 speed actually takes our drum loop and turns it into something else. We end up with a sort of a triplet or syncopated feel. So this is a thing that I like, and this is where I wish it had more controls. So if I could control the pitching versus the loop points, then I could be taking in my little drum loop outputting it back in its new format, which is cool. That's a thing that I would say was a thing I could use from time to time. Like if I was looking for a piece and I want my piece to have something that's a bit like a CR78 or a Mini Pops loop in it, but I don't want to use the same CR78 or Mini Pop loops, I can make my own, obviously, but you end up with a certain feel which is different from how those guys were making them. So the ability to control that better would definitely appeal to me. So you can find interesting things in here, and that's, I think, what most people are looking for. So just understand how your divisions here work. Your loop divisions work on saying, if we choose 1 bar, we're going to end up with a result that's 1 bar long by taking half a bar's material and dumping the other half a bar. We have a fade-in option, and that is once we hit go, it changes. And that becomes a crossfade between what we might call the up and the down version. Sort of like an old DJ trick. Similarly, we could automate it ourselves, which is sort of how I would do it. That's really our functionality here. We can also go to 4 times, which is uber slow. Okay, if you find a use for it, go for it. We've got this little thing here for smoothing. Without any kind of smoothing, we will get some little pops as the loops happen. Let's go to and we've got all those pops everywhere. We might want to keep them, in which case we go this way. In which case it focuses on the percussion and then moves across to an FX mode, which is all just based on how it's handling little crossfades and stuff. So people will see it and use it as, and that's a little interesting for that as a way of going, oh, well, if I press this button, I press this button, and I do this and I do this, maybe I'll find something that I think is interesting. Now, that's not to say that every composer doesn't work that way. But if you find that something interesting, brilliant. It is a way of doing that. Without having to do any of the hard work with the possibility of it failing, like when we're here, it just doesn't sound that good. Unless, of course, I wanted that thing. We've then got... Let's just put this back to something like sane settings. This band limiter, which has 2 modes. It's not apparently immediately obvious. Hear how there the top of the hi-hats is unaffected, everything else is affected. It takes a little bit to pick up because the system has to start from the beginning every time. Fair enough. Here we've got all the original low material coming through, and only the higher stuff has been squished. Or we can pick a bit in the middle. Personally, I just find that weird because it's musically not very well related. It is also possible, if you press the headphone icon, to only hear that band. This makes more sense to me. So that's just high and low pass filtering out all the other stuff. You'll find uses for it, or you won't. That's really the whole plugin. There's sort of very little to it. Conclusion is that my first thought, and to some extent my final thought, is why would we even need this? What's the purpose of this? But that comes from the perspective of somebody who wouldn't use this. Or if they did use it, would need a different set of controls to enable that to be more in control, which leaves me feeling that it's a color by numbers sort of thing. However, I must be fair and acknowledge that there are a whole pile of people who make their music by getting slabs of audio, loops, and then choppity-choppitying on them, and that this is just another kind of choppity, very similar to one or two of the devices that were inside the Effectrix that I looked at just before. Obviously this has less ability, but it's significantly less in cost. And again, it seems very well built. The Cableguys really do seem to specialize in doing this kind of thing. Therefore, if it's the kind of thing that you're looking for, if you feel like this is going to get you to where you need to be to deliver results that at least your fans want, then for $12, it's probably a very safe investment. Maybe best you don't ask me a lot of questions about this, but I am happy to answer what I can. I've got a pretty fair understanding of how it works. If you do ask them down below politely, and I'll see what I can do to engage on that and help you out. Please don't forget to hit the subscribify button, and you can also pop over to higherhertz.com and subscribe there for the different channel of information. You have a great day now.